Moscow terrorist attack. Blame first, truth later. The current terrorist attack, if it is true that 90 plus people have been killed, is not something that can be brushed under the carpet, an unfortunate few deaths. The USA knew perfectly well who had carried out 9/11 within hours of the attack and promptly engaged in a war that was to last 20 plus years, one that is still ongoing. Never mind what others have found out through diligent analysis and research, nothing has prevented the US and UK from participating in their Middle Eastern wars, including the no red line support for their sponsors' ancestral homeland. The USA and UK have also been brazen in their determination to support an agenda of war against Russia, including funding and arming Ukraine since 2014, giving the lie to the unprovoked aggression narrative. The USA and UK also gave warnings to avoid large gatherings and concerts just recently, indicating foreknowledge that perhaps they forgot to share with Russia. The same Russia that they have targeted with the world's greatest array of economic weapons of war ever amassed. Yet the same Russia that is sending international astronauts to the ISS on one of its Soyuz rockets. Did the USA forget to sanction Russia's rocket industry? Or weren't Ukrainian rockets, adapted Patriot missiles perhaps, available? In celebrating its proxy war with Russia and openly using its personnel and resources against Russia, the West gave Russia cause to attack the West directly. Russia declined to do so. In supporting direct attacks against Russia with non-Ukrainian personnel and American predominantly equipment, the West gave Russia cause to attack the West directly. Russia declined to do so. Secure in their knowledge that Russia will never attack them personally and directly, American and UK politicians have no hesitation in promoting ever more aggressive action against Russia, the courage of a bully knowing they're not at risk. The massacre in Moscow, like all other massacres, is going to galvanize public anger, and it is not hard to recognize who the nations are and who the people are who want Russia destroyed, taken apart, humiliated, and profited from in its collapse. If Russia should decide to emulate the West and blame now, do truth later, and target the nations and politicians who have been so aggressively targeting them militarily, economically, financially, then how is that not simply doing as the West has taught them to do? Russia had already decided that enough was enough, that this was a war, because NATO nations wanted a war, were prosecuting a war, and were actively engaged in attacking Russia on Russian soil. With the Moscow terrorist attack, I suspect that the West has just poured gasoline onto a conflagration, a deeply burning anger in the Russian people that they have to fight yet again against Europe, even the NAZIs. It did not end well for Napoleon, nor for Germany, and if this gets out of hand, as our politicians are determined to have it do so, then recall only that we in the West taught Russia how to respond to such attacks. Blame first, truth later. Britain today is not the Britain of post-World War II. It has become a malign tool of a sociopathic, narcissistic elite with delusions of divine entitlement. Maybe it was ever thus, but in World War II we could make a plausible case for being on the side of decency and justice. Over 2 decades of fraudulent and malicious agendas and actions by the elite in Washington and London have been the source of millions of deaths. If the terror attack in Moscow becomes the tipping point, that turns the terror onto the elite of Washington and London. The elite can only look to their own actions for the cause. The people of the West need to wake up. The elite are not our parents, our friends, our protectors, or even halfway decent human beings. No halfway decent human being sends 500,000 Ukrainians to their deaths, Boris Johnson, rather than have peace. No halfway decent human being sends 500,000 Ukrainians to their death as a result of a decade's diligent geopolitical engineering to attack Russia, Victoria Nuland. The West lost all moral authority the day Bush cried, "You're either with us or against us." I'm with decency, integrity, fair play, courtesy and respect for other human beings, and not killing them for an ideology. The West has declared there are no red lines for Ukraine, no red lines for the other ancestral homeland. If Russia decides that fair enough there are no red lines for the West, remember who made that policy first. Our clique, our elite, our band of sociopathic narcissists, secure thousands of miles away from combat, have made the rules and sown the wind. If Russia decides that they should reap the whirlwind as Napoleon found, as Germany found in World War II, then should we be surprised when it happens a third time? Russia didn't change and become more warlike. Look at its borders today and where it's intervening. The West decided yet again to take on Russia, primitive, backward, resource-rich Russia, and yet again, primitive, backward, resource-rich Russia is trashing the best of the West. Someday the West will learn. Someday the Western people will wake up and demand decency and integrity from their leaders. Just not today and not soon enough. Whatever you read about the Moscow attack in the media, remember that the USA needed no permission to go to war against Islam and Arab nations. It just declared the enemy and went to war. If Russia acts with more moderation, the sad part is it will simply embolden the West still further. By the time Russia finally and fully engages with the nations hell-bent on its destruction, the weapons of choice may be those that eradicate humanity. At some point you have to decide if you're a sleeping bystander of Western aggression, a massive supporter of Western aggression, or a sane person that thinks the USA should never have hired Ukraine to provoke a war with Russia. Renting Ukraine has not been a good deal for ordinary Ukrainians. It has been a very good deal for Ukrainian politicians and senior military figures. It has also been a very good deal for the American and European arms industries. It has been a very good deal for the geopolitical activists who like a war with no American body bags. The only problem is that when you constantly hit on a guy that takes the blows without really hitting back, someday the day may come when they decide to hit back. Andrew Mather, AndrewMatherExplore@gmail.com